Taehyung knelt Jungkook's back when he saw Jimin was approaching them. Meanwhile, Bright stood up from his chair immediately and walked away went to his other classmates at the behind. Even though he had been friends with Taehyung and Jungkook since they were freshmen, he doesn't like to be with them when Jimin was there, joined the group. Taehyung and Jungkook looked at each other when they saw Bright left them with their understandable expressions. Jimin, Taehyung whispered when the head student sat beside him with his poker face. You are late. Is everything okay? Jungkook asked, also whispered. Jimin turned his head towards them. Then he smiled mischievously. It's Jim. Long time no see, he said while grinning. Jim! Taehyung and Jungkook said simultaneously and he just nodded to them. Why did you appear now? Jungkook asked in disbelief. Why my presence? Jimin is the head student. Taehyung cut him off. He is supposed to talk to these freshers, to welcome them and explain to them about the polka system and the activities during orientation for the next 3 weeks. I don't know anything about that, Jim said with blank expressions. That's it. Then why did you come out right now? Taehyung asked, sounding mad, but still controlled his voice and Jungkook tried to calm him. Oh please, you know the reason. Wait, don't you think you should be grateful that at least I am here? Well, even though I'm not Jimin, but I still come here instead of going somewhere else, Jim said while looking at the freshers like he was searching for someone. I already checked all the freshers' names. The person who you have been searching for is not here, Jungkook said. Jim was about to say something but stopped when Bright approached them. Hey, until when you all want to chit-chatting? We need to start now, he said. Sure, Bright, we will start now, Jungkook said to him. Taehyung and Jungkook looked at each other before they looked at Jim. A sigh escaped from their mouth at the same time. How the hell Jim supposed to lead the orientation when he knew nothing about it? Jimin was supposed to explain to the freshers about the polka system since he was the head student, but looking at his situations right now looked like they should change the plan. Jimin also had reminded Jungkook and Taehyung just in case his other personality suddenly show up. Taehyung should took the role until Jimin come back. It was unexpected because it's been 2 months since Jimin's other personalities didn't show up. They thought Jimin finally could control them, but they were wrong. After those entire therapists and everything Jimin had done, nothing seems going well and shown no progress. It's unable to be cured, of course. Jimin had suffered from multiple personality disorder since he was 12 years old. That time his parents thought that their son had some mental illness, but by having an uncle who's a psychiatrist made his parents realize that Jimin is not normal like other kids. Because of the incident back then, Jimin had a trauma and that causes him to suffer from DID. No one wanted to remind him about the incident because if they did it only caused a danger to Jimin himself. People who knows about his conditions were only people who were really close to Jimin, his parents, his uncle who was a psychiatrist and his wife, which also a lecturer in Shinhua International University, and his two best friends Taehyung and Jungkook. At first, it was difficult and challenging for him and everyone. He couldn't remember what happened and always woke up in different places with no memory of what he was doing up until now. There were five personalities. These split personalities or alters often had their own distinct like name, ages, moods, memories and vocabulary. People who knew about his disorder already could sense if Jimin was being himself or not, since each personality had different certain habits like a smoking, become violent or being mute and timid. They could immediately sense it. Among the five personalities, all of them really hoped these two personalities didn't come up because if they did, it only means trouble. These two personalities were the most problematic one, JM and J. The senior Taehyung was busy explaining to all of the students about the new system called as the Polka system. P personality, O opinion, L limit, C care, A ability. All of these were not very different from SOTUS system since the purpose was still the same, which is to hone a sense of unity and regularity amongst freshers to help them settle into the school better. But still, all think the same and agreed the polka system was much more way better than SOTUS system. You will begin your 3 weeks as fresher during orientation instead of 6 weeks, unlike the previous orientation. Bella, I want to go toilet. You whispered to her. Go by yourself, she said, and eyes only focused to one person who was currently talking on the stage, Taehyung. It made you wonder why Taehyung and Jungkook, who were the only one who do the talking when the head student was there. Jimin just sat on the chair while eyes wandering around, scanning freshers like a predator, searching for its prey. Is it because he is the son of Park, then he can do whatever he wanted? You really hate that type of person. The only time when he spoke was when he introduced himself, then asked Taehyung and Jungkook to do all the talking. Believe me, you got enough sleep last night, but you won't as soon as Jimin introduced himself. Bella, I don't want to go alone. Let's go, you said and shook her shoulder to wake her up from drooling over Taeyong. She was busy playing games when Taeyong talked, but she immediately paid so much attention once she heard Taeyong's voice. Leave me alone, YN. You are not a kid. You said you are an adult, right? Go by yourself, Bella said and jerked away your hands. You pouted, then stood up and left the auditorium after asked for permission from a senior who stood in front of the door. Can't believe you kicked me out just because you are falling for a senior, you mumbled as you washed your hands in anger. You wiped your wet hands with the tissues before threw it to the dustbin. You checked yourself in the mirror and was about to walk away when you saw someone was coming in. But you stopped when you saw the person. It was the head student Park Jimin. The head student was also looked at you with widened eyes, and that made you so confused. Your senior's face looked pale like he was just saw a ghost. You walked to senior and walked past by him, but the person stopped you by gripping your wrist and turned you around. By the way, it's common washroom, common for both for boys and for girls. Finally, I found you, Kia. Jimin woke up from his daydream upon hearing the ringtone from his phone. He rubbed his eyes and then just stared blankly at the ceiling. His phone still rang on the beside table and he looked like he doesn't have any thought to answer the call. The phone stopped ringing and seconds later it rang again. He reached for his phone and saw Jungkook's name on the screen before he slid to answer the call. Yeah, why you so late answering your phone? Jungkook said angrily at the other line. Sorry, my ringtone just amazing, Jimin said with his morning hoarse voice. Jimin could hear the other line let out a heavy sigh. As long as you are still Jimin, get up right now. You are the head student. Don't be late now. Goodbye. Jungkook said and ended the call immediately. Jungkook called him just to remind Jimin about the orientation and of course to check if Jimin is still being himself. Jimin sat up and looked at the calendar. It's the day. Hope everything going well until the end. He prayed. Everyone voted him to be the head student for this year. Even though he denied it that he couldn't be the head student, his batch still trusted him, and that left him with no choice. If only they knew the reality was he is not the sole owner of his own body. Everyone probably avoid him since he might freak them out from being so different. Thanks God, thanks to God, he had his best friends Taehyung and Jungkook, who always be there for him. Jimin stood in front of the big mirror and stared at himself. A sigh escaped from his mouth. Guys, please don't come out today. I don't want to ruin this moment. Please understand my situation too, he said, looking at himself. His alters often shows up and took his body at certain situations. Like an example, if he got stressed and had panic attack, shows up and the next thing he remember he always ended up in the hospital. Then if he got angry and mad, JM shows up and the next thing he remember he woke up in a dark place. While his other alters like Jimmy and Jim and Jimin often shows up in important occasions. Even when he got too excited, he could also woke up those alters. Over the past years, he was copying by himself. Even though he had no memories what he was doing with when his alters woke up and took his body from him, he still had people around him that always be there to keep him safe. Since today was the freshers orientation day and since he was the head student, he just hoped not any one of his older shows and ruin everything he had planned. Especially Jim, who was so stubborn by only saying that he needed to find someone before his time and that made him himself ran away from the eyes of Taeyong or Jungkook, whose his dad trusted to take care of him when they were in the school. Jimin couldn't remember since when it all started. The memories were still blurry when it all started. When he was 12-year old, finally he could understand himself that there were another person in his body and mind. His uncle was a psychiatrist and he was also the person who helps him to overcome his differences and try to accept himself. Everyone helps him to understand those alter inside him. The first alter showed up when he was 12 years old. His name is Jamie. His parents seemed shocked when he saw the difference in him. When they eat dinner, Jimin suddenly yelled to his parents for the first time just because they chewed so loud. Then the next day he started throwing tantrums when once again he yelled and threw the bowl of his soup on the floor before he passed out. His parents thought that he was sick, so they sent him to the hospital. Once Jimin woke up, he couldn't remember anything. And when they came home and Jimin went to his room, he found violin on his bed. He asked his parents about it, but his parents only praised him that he was so good at playing violin and promised to buy him a piano just like what he asked. In fact, he couldn't remember when did he asking for a violin or piano when he never had time to learn to play an instruments before. The second altar shows up just 1 week after the first one. His name is Jem. His parents thought that their son was kidnapped by someone, so they filed a report to the police since they couldn't find him anywhere and Jimin did not come home for 3 days straight. On the fourth day, Jimin suddenly shows up in front of the door and his parents ask him where he had been. Jimin couldn't remember anything but kept mumbling one name, Kia. His parents knew there was something wrong with their son. They asked for help from Diana, Jimin's uncle, who was a psychiatrist, and decided to make a therapy session for Jimin. In the middle of the therapy, the third alter shows up. His name is JM. Jimin was only 12 years old that time when it happened, but the person inside him made him like he was an adult when he punched Tehnat before he ran away from the hospital. Jimin, don't do this, let me help you, his uncle said, breathless when he looked up at him. Tehnat felt hopeless when Jimin or the person inside him punched and kicked him hard. Jimin's body was small but not his strength. My name is Jam. Remember that, you old man? The boy said and kicked Tehnat's leg. You are sick, Jimin. Let me. I'm not sick. If I see you again, I will break your bones into pieces, he said to Tehnat before he ran away, leaving his uncle in pain. The next thing Jimin remembered, he woke up in a dark place, and when he returned home, his parents started explaining to him about everything. At first, he couldn't accept himself. He tried to suicide many times before, but his parents always said that he was not being himself, but he got controlled by the fourth alter, Jay. Jimin remembered that he heard voice told him to do bad things. Just slit your throat. Don't you like blood? It won't hurt, trust me. The voice often said that, and when Jimin didn't follow as he commanded, the voice started screaming at him. It's not you, Jimin. It's Jay. Ask you to do all the bad things. Tenant said. The last altar was J-Man. He was the one who is more immature than the other altars and also the one who explained about those altars to Tenant, Jimin's uncle and also his therapist. Jimin might not remember what happened when these altars chose up, but his altars knew a little bit about each other more than Jimin himself. Sometimes he couldn't feel like there was someone who kept watching his every movement. Every moment, and he also could hear voices. For example, when he suddenly became anxious and nervous, he could feel Jamin's presence. Jamin was like Jimin's angel who kept protecting him from waking up his elders. You're fine, I'm with you, the voice of Jimin said, and just like that, his anxiety reduced. The only one thing they had in common was running. It was their game, it was their reality. No one knew. Jimin looked at himself in the mirror for the last time, then he grabbed his bag on the table. But then he crouched down and held his temple. Once he felt the headache, he groaned in pain. Don't, please, he mumbled and tried to gather his energy to find the bottle of pills inside his bag. Benzodiazepines helped him to relax and calm his mind. But before he could reach for the bottle, he fell on the floor and went unconscious. It was too late. One of his altar finally took over his body. Jimin went unconscious for a second before he woke up. He was not being himself anymore. He opened his eyes and found himself laid on the floor. He sat up and looked around. It's so nice to be here, he said and stood up. He looked at his wristwatch. Oh, orientation day, he said and immediately grabbed his bag and went out from the bedroom. Jimin ate breakfast first. His mom called for him when he saw Jimin was walking down the stairs and went to the front door. It's okay, mom, I will eat at the cafeteria with taehyung and jungkook, he said and waved goodbye. Son, you forgot to hug your mom and me, his dad asked. Made Jimin stopped his step. He turned around slowly, facing his parents, and then grinned naughtily. The familiar grin made the parents confused before their eyes became widened. Jimin's mom and dad said in union. Hi, Jimin's mom and dad. I'm late. I'm going by now. Bye. He said, waved goodbye, and ran away. The parents just looked at each other before a sigh escaped their mouth. What should we do, honey? He can't be cured, right? I thought we can, but it's not going to be this easy. I will tell Tanner that Jim appears. I was getting bored sitting on the stage while hearing Taehyung and Jungkook talk about this and that to the freshers. How long was it since I didn't appear? 4 months, 5 months? There must be the reason why I had to appear right now, exactly on this day, the orientation day of the freshers. Maybe I could find her here. I was eyeing every freshers, but all of them looked like they were avoiding my stare. I told you to stop looking at them like that, Jim. You scared them away. I whispered from Jungkook. From Jungkook came in my ears. I just ignored him and stood up. I couldn't see clearly from this stage, which means I need to go down and look at their faces closer, hoping to find her soon. Where are you going? Jungkook asked while gripping Jim's wrist. I told you already, there is no Kia in the name list, which means you can't find the person here. Who said I'm searching for her? I said, tried to lie, because I knew Jungkook might not let me go easily. Oh, really? He said, mocking. The only reason you appear is only to find the one girl named Kia, isn't it? You mentioned many times already. Bingo. If you know, then just let me go. I don't know when I will appear again. This is probably my one and only chance to find her, I said and jerked away my hand from him. Jungkook blocked my way when I tried to get away from him. What are you going to do if you find her? He asked while crossing his arms. There was no reason for me to answer his question. I was about to run away, but my feet couldn't move when my eyes catch the familiar person who walked away from the auditorium. I couldn't see clearly her face, but I recognized her silhouette. When I find her, we will run away together, I said to Jungkook before I ran past by him, walked down the stage and ignored Taehyung calling for me with that name, Jimin. I'm not Jimin. Why should I listen to him? I walked out from the auditorium and looked around, hoped to find her, but she was nowhere to be found. Hey, you, I called one of the boys that stood in front of the door. What are you doing here, Jimin? What are you talking about with the girl just now? I asked without answering him. He looked at me confused before he answered. Girl? Oh, that cute girl. She just asked for permission to go to the toilet. He answered, and I just looked at him while gritting my teeth. I nodded before I approached him, only to whisper, if I hear you call her cute once again, you will be dead. I retorted, and he looked at me with widened eyes. No one can call my girl cute except me. Yes, I am possessive of her. Jim entered the toilet and stopped once he saw the person who he had been searching for. His eyes widened looking at her and his heartbeat started to beat fast. The person walked to him and walked past by him, but Jim immediately gripped her wrist and turned her to face him. "Finally, I found you, Kia," Jim said. "Excuse me?" You blinked and asked, confused. Jim gripped your wrist and tightened his grip like he was afraid the person in front of him right now might disappear. "Sunbay Nam, what are you doing?" you asked, sound scared, when Jim closed the distance between them and you stepped back. And now you had nowhere to go because you was trapped between the wall behind you and your senior's body in front of you. You just blinked your eyes looking at your senior and tried to push him away, but the next thing you never expect had happened. In Jim's dictionary, Jim kissed Kia, but in reality, Jimin kissed YN.